Hey, good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us for the Round 5 Community Investment Fund webinar. It is great to see many familiar faces as we go through this. So I just want to start off and talk about some of the transition that's gone on over the last several months at DECD. So we're very excited to announce that Melinda Wilson has been named the director of the Office of Community Development and the Community Investment Fund. And we have some new faces that you see. Wes Bemis is joining us as one of our project managers on our team, and so is Kim Parsons Whitaker, who any municipalities that have been part of the Communities Challenge process have probably had the great opportunity to work with Kim. So we have a great team here to continue to support you with Community Investment Fund. I just want to reiterate, Paniota has been through multiple rounds here with our team. Melinda joined Community Investment Fund right before round 1 decisions were made. Kim has been a reviewer. Wes has been a reviewer. So even though there's some new faces, it's a lot of consistency within the program, and we're looking to continue, the great trajectory that the program's been on and be able to support all of you. So you're in very good hands, but, I just want to reiterate, Melinda is the best and first point of contact as you go through this next round of applications. But Wes and Kim and Paniota are all here to help you as we move towards the applications. So with that, I will turn it over. Oh, I want to make two other points. Two other points just that I want to emphasize from my point of view now as a board member for Community Investment Fund that I think are really important for you to keep in mind before we get into the meat and potatoes of everything. Shovel readiness. So we're going to talk later on in here today about shovel readiness, but shovel readiness is not just a word that you write into your narrative. Shovel readiness really is about the specificity of the project, how far along you are in terms of construction plans, in terms of site control, any sort of permitting or local approvals that need to occur, and the realistic budget for your project. So shovel readiness is really a key piece that the board has been paying more and more attention to. We do not want to park millions of dollars on a project while it continues to be developed and not see those dollars deployed. And then the other piece that really ties in with it is take advantage of the planning grants if you are at an early stage in your project and you do not have a fully formed idea. The Community Investment Fund board last year put into place a change policy. So if you're bringing a project forward that is not fully formed and you think that you're going to work it out after we've made the award, I would caution you, because your grant agreement is going to tie to the outcomes that you state in your application. And if they're not going to meet those outcomes, then there is a change process that Kim will go into much greater detail on. But please bring fully formed projects forward with your applications. It's not the time to just iterate and kind of spitball on project ideas. So with that, I will turn it over to Melinda. Thank you.
And before you go, Matt, I think that we can all say that we're very appreciative for everything that you've done with getting Community Investment Fund to the point that it is and making it available to so many people in such a open, transparent, communicative way. It's very appreciated. And we are all very glad that you're at the Deputy Commissioner level to continue to guide us in this process. And now we will zip into the webinar. Today, we did our introductions. We're gonna have an overview of the program, timeline and the process to apply, which is very detailed, and we'll give you as much information as we can. And we're gonna go into some lessons learned, some tips and tricks, so to speak, as to what we can do. Q&A is gonna happen at the end. If you can please use the Q&A function of Zoom. This will allow us to monitor your questions as they come in. Wesley's going to be monitoring them for us, and he'll be able to answer some of your questions immediately, and others will hold to the end. You may want to hold your questions and enter them a bit later in the presentation because we hope to answer many questions as we go through this. We're going to start with a quick review of round 4 applications. As you can see, and as you've seen from previous rounds, Community Investment Fund is extremely competitive. For round 4, we had 137 applications, 125 of which were eligible. There's a significant amount of reapplications. That's something that you'll hear over and over again in this presentation is reapplying with your project and updating from input that you've received from the review process. In round 4, there were 38 municipal applications, 87 nonprofit applications. And as far as the categories of applications, there were 39 for renovation of a public facility. And always on the rise since they became part of the CIF process, there were 40 applications for planning grants. $508 million was requested in round 4. And there were 125 one-on-one meetings with CIF staff and applicants. Over 4 rounds, with 42% of awarded projects have been to municipalities, 58% to nonprofits. An interesting statistic that I want y'all to keep in mind is the overall success rate of applications to receive full or partial funding is 16%. There are many great projects that are in that reapplication status. We like to see good projects come back through CIF. As you can see from that demand, there just is not enough money to fund all of the great projects that you all are bringing. So we're going to talk a bit about that reapplication process as we get through this. Now, for some basics on Community Investment Fund, eligible applicants are municipalities, nonprofits, and community development corporations that operate within 55 municipalities, which in the state of Connecticut are designated public investment communities or have alliance district school systems. You can see from the map what these municipalities are. New communities may become eligible as designated by the Office of Policy and Management each year. OPM did not designate new communities this year. But if you drop off that list, which is what we're all hoping for, then you still are grandfathered eligible for Community Investment Fund. Eligible projects. Per the CIF statute that was established in 2021, eligible projects must promote economic or community development in the municipality where the project is located, which must be one of the 55 eligible communities. I'm going to read to you the second bullet. Such project or grant and aid furthers consistent and systematic, fair, just, and impartial treatment of all individuals, including individuals who belong to underserved and marginalized communities that have been denied such treatment, such as Black, Latino, Indigenous, and Native American persons, Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, and other persons of color, members of religious minorities, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer persons, and other persons comprising the LGBTQ+ community, persons who live in rural areas, and persons otherwise adversely affected by persistent poverty or inequality. Make sure that you are complying with the letter of the law here with regards to your eligibility of your project. Projects should be transformational, as we say. What we mean there is we want to have new outcomes, increased outcomes. We're looking for intentionality. We're looking for the process that shows that the applicant has involved the community in their planning, development, and involvement around the community development project. We'd like to stress what we've heard from the board repeatedly. Projects should have community engagement and input into the use and design of the capital project. For planning applications, the process should include community engagement And that doesn't mean holding meetings to inform folks about your project and the preconceived ideas that you have about your project. It means using different methods to elicit input into the project from a variety of folks, some of whom may never have been at the table to give input into such projects before. This is the mission of the CIF program. Eligible project categories. 3 project categories for Community Investment Fund: capital improvements, which are brownfields remediation, affordable housing, infrastructure improvements, several different versions of capital improvements here. CIF also supports small business support programs, which are revolving loan programs or programs that allow for startup funding to establish a new small business in a community. Our very popular planning program will fund such things as community engagement, feasibility, need studies, engineering towards construction documents. The planning grant has a set amount of $250,000. I want to repeat that, and we're going to repeat that several times throughout the webinar. This is a set amount of $250,000. Please budget around that accordingly. Project budget. The minimum capital request for CIF is $250,000. The minimum capital total budget must be $1.5 million for a capital project or a small business program. That sets the bar a little bit higher. Your projects need to be a little bit larger. There is no limit to your grant request. Feel free to dream big, but make sure that your project is actually feasible. CIF has no required match. You'll find out a little bit later how the projects can gain some priority and some alignment with DECD best practices to have leverage funding, but you can come into CIF with no match. Something we'd like to make really clear about the budget is that the full capital stack must be complete in order for your grant to close. We understand that projects will be putting capital stacks together. You will have other grant applications that are out that you're waiting on results from. We understand that. But for an actual grant closing for a community investment fund program, we are asking that the complete capital stack be in place. The budget must be submitted on the CIF Round 5 Sources and Uses Budget template. This is an Excel file. You can download it from the Community Investment Fund website. We ask that if you apply for a community investment fund, you keep that as an Excel document. Please don't turn it into a PDF, leave it as an Excel file. We also ask that you have detailed budgets in the applicant's format. However, you've formulated your own budget, please let us see that. We don't have a template for that. That's going to be your way of submitting your budget. Please provide supporting documentation for your budget, which is, your estimates or, whatever you need to do to support your budget, to explain your budget to us and how you developed it. As I mentioned earlier, there are certain prioritizations that are set out in the CIF process. According to the statute, municipalities can receive prioritization 3 ways: having implemented local hiring preferences according to Section 71112. The applicant has that leverage of municipal, private, philanthropic, or federal funds. This is non-state funding, counts as leverage. Other state funding, please include it, but it does not count as a leveraged priority. A letter of support from one or more members of the General Assembly in whose district the project will be located will provide prioritization for a municipality. Members of the CIF board do not need to issue a separate letter. And we understand that in some communities, that can be a majority of the General Assembly representation that will not be held against an applicant. Nonprofit organizations and community development corporations, along with municipalities, can receive prioritization for having a project labor agreement which will propose to employ ex-offenders or individuals with physical, intellectual, or development disabilities. This is in regards to construction. Okay, a project labor agreement will be something that you'll have drawn up by your own counsel, which would apply to the construction. Some other elements on the state funding. You can include past spending on a project for prioritization. So say you're a municipality that has already put funding into environmental studies or remediation on a property that you're bringing forward to be the basis for your capital project. You can include those costs as leverage funding. As far as letters of support, where they do provide prioritization for a municipality, we do want all applicants to have those letters of support. And please consider speaking with your elected officials, your delegation, both local and at the state level, to really explain to them what your capital project is all about, why it's important, why it aligns with the priorities of the municipality and the state. Make sure that they understand your project so that they can advocate for you. So this isn't as easy as having someone sign a letter for you. It really is more of a conversation related to your project. Small business support programs, all of those other things apply. And the CIF board is required to consider other certain factors, as you can see on the slide, with regards to the revolving loan part of the small business support program. Again, you can talk to CIF staff during a one-on-one appointment about more details with small business support programs. At this point, I would like to turn this over to Kim, and she's going to talk to you about DECD best practices.
Great. Thanks so much, Melinda. And hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. So we'll start with this slide, DECD best practices. Across many of DECD's capital grant programs right now, you'll find that we review and assess projects in alignment with DECD best practices, and they are listed in bullet points right here. So our deputy commissioner had talked about shovel readiness at the start of the program. This is a little bit more detail on that. So we are looking for you in your application to inform us, where is your project in design, engineering, and permitting? Are your construction documents at 30% or more completion? So the shovel readiness piece of it, critically important. Also, bear in mind that state of Connecticut bidding, contracting, and procurement procedures are required. So, for instance, stating in your application that you have your contractor selected and lined up is not what we're looking for. Additionally, a project timeline that requires funding from us prior to May 2024. So right now would not be.
Kim, I'm just going to interrupt you for a second. The slides have not advanced, and I'm seeing a lot of questions from Q&A about please advancing the slide.
There we go. Thank you, Wes, so much. And my apologies to everybody. So strong project readiness, shovel readiness. State of Connecticut bidding, contracting, and procurement procedures are required. Bear that in mind. Additionally, a project timeline that requires funding from us prior to May of 2024 would not be a good fit. It's May of 2024 right now, because it's not likely that you'll have a decision on an award until late in 2024. Another best practice, leveraging funding. DECD looks at non-state funds, as Melinda had mentioned, that are committed to projects. And these include municipal, federal, and private sources. So if you have any one of those, provide backup, provide information, whether that another source is pending or it's secured. Give us some information about that. Remember, what you commit to in terms of leverage funding in the project is what we expect you to have available when it comes time to the grant contract, when it comes time to write the grant contract. And then a realistic and comprehensive budget. How was your budget determined? Did you take prevailing wage into account? I'm going to go into that a little bit more in a moment. Did you speak with multiple construction professionals in estimating your budget? And are you using up-to-date estimates in terms of budget? Limiting soft costs. That includes not adding blanket administrative fees to the budget. But it also includes using some of those leveraged funds to pay for soft costs, including architectural engineering studies, planning studies, again, administrative studies. 15% in soft costs is the bar that we're using for CIF. So nothing above 15% in soft costs for the use of CIF money. And then a comprehensive project plan. Do you have a plan for operations once the project is done? Give us some information about that. Is your project feasible? How have you determined that the outcomes that you're stating, the anticipated outcomes, will be achieved? Show us a little bit about that. Next slide, please, Panayota. We also look at a project's alignment with your municipality's plan of conservation and development. So when you review the POCD, where do you see this project reflected? And do you have the municipality's support for the project that you're proposing for CIF funding? Also, the Governor's Economic Action Plan. There are 4 pillars that support inclusive economic growth. The CIF application asks you to explain how your project aligns with these pillars and their goals. You only need to address the pillars that your project aligns with. Don't try to be all things to all people. Really focus in on the vision of your project, the purpose, the goals of your project, and how it speaks most strongly to one, possibly more of the 4 pillars. You don't have to have a check mark in each box. So this is your opportunity to tell us more about the inclusive economic growth potential of your project. So workforce, does the project broaden the base of skilled workers to meet increasing industry demand? Communities, does the project attract and retain talent by investing in vibrant and affordable communities for all? The innovation pillar, does the project support growth and generate inclusive economic opportunity within Connecticut's most innovative and specialized industries? And then the 4th pillar, the business environment. Does the project improve Connecticut's environment and reputation for starting and growing businesses? Next slide, please. So a little bit about prevailing wage here. We want to emphasize that CIF grants are administered by DECD and therefore are subject to all of the same requirements as other DECD grant programs. Per state statute, prevailing wage may be required for projects that receive DECD funding. If you have questions about prevailing wage and its applicability to your project, we advise you to reach out to the Department of Labor to ensure that you receive a formal determination of the applicability of prevailing wage rates for your project. Mary Toner is the contact person. We've included her information here on this slide. And it's also in the FAQ document posted on the application page of the CIF website. It is the applicant's responsibility to plan for prevailing wages on the project. Failure to do so can lead to budget gaps, so please bear that in mind. And then also, as I mentioned previously, state of Connecticut bidding, contracting, and procurement procedures are required. Public procurement is mandatory, and all DECD's procurement guidelines apply to CIF projects administered by DECD. Next slide, please. A little bit about the State Historic Preservation Office and SHPO's involvement. It is the state's policy to preserve important historic, cultural, and natural aspects of our Connecticut heritage. This is in Connecticut General Statutes, Section 22A-1B4. The state must consider the effects of its actions on historic structures and landmarks. Per regulations, this includes direct, indirect, and cumulative effects. So the State Historic Preservation Office, SHPO, will evaluate if the project has any effect on historic structures or sites. We are not looking for a determination from SHPO in advance of your project. If your building is over 50 years of age, or you're going to be disturbing green space, ground that hasn't been developed yet, we encourage you to have a conversation with the SHPO office. Next slide, please. SHPO is consulted in our review of CIF applications. So you will see on our application page, the SHPO project notification form. This is mandatory for all CIF capital applications, not planning grants or small business program applications, but for capital applications. SHPO does an initial review of each capital project and then gives SHPO staff give CIF input into projects. They may have questions or require additional information about your project. Please let us know in the application if other state or federal funding will be used or if federal or state permitting will be required. SHPO reviews the notification forms in detail upon award and issues a determination letter at that point, not for the application itself, but once the awards are made. If you have already received a SHPO determination letter for your project, please include that with your application materials. Next slide, please. A little bit about the Connecticut Environmental Policy Act, or CEPA. This process is generally referred to as CEPA scoping. If CEPA scoping is necessary for a funded project, DECD staff will post the notice in the Environmental Monitor. The CIF application asks you to accept costs associated with CEPA scoping should it be deemed necessary. So more information, this on the slide that you're seeing, the bottom link, generic environmental classification document. This is a live link in the PDF of this slide. It's very helpful in determining if your project may require CEPA scoping. Next slide, please. So a little bit, the next two slides here, a little bit about the review process and then the timeline. So it starts with eligible applicants will submit applications via the CIF website. We're going to go into the mechanics of how that happens shortly. But between now and June 21st at 12 noon, you have the opportunity to submit your applications and required attachments. Then DECD reviews each application for eligibility, and eligible applicants are summarized by DECD and forwarded to the CIF Board of Directors. Then the CIF Board reviews eligible applications and votes on recommendations. From there, it goes off to the governor's office. The governor reviews recommended applications and issues final recommendations for review before the State Bond Commission. And then the State Bond Commission issues approvals for projects. Next slide, please. So the timeline for all of this. The deadline to submit CIF Round 5 applications is Friday, June 21st, 2024 by 12 noon. Then we have a period of time where DECD reviews each and every application and every attachment. So the CIF board then meets to review and recommend applications to the governor. That will happen September 10th or sometime later. So sometime this fall, early in the fall. The governor then reviews and issues final recommendations for approved projects. And then the State Bond Commission meets to issue final approvals. That will be 2 months from the CIF co-chair submitting projects to the governor. And then looking ahead, we have a round 6, and that will open in October of 2024. So the ball keeps rolling here. Next slide, please. How to apply. Right now, there are several documents available on the CIF website. You can view the CIF policy and guidelines adopted by the CIF board, the notice of funding availability, the application itself, and an application instruction document, a separate document. And we'll be updating the FAQ document after this webinar, and we'll work to update that with relevant questions submitted via email. So the application submission. Your CIF application will be submitted electronically online through the CIF website. No paper, hard copies, or emails will be accepted for applications. Several attachments are required or allowed. Applicants will request a unique SharePoint folder by emailing communityinvestmentfund@ct.gov. You see that email on the bottom of your slide here. Please indicate the email address of up to 2 members on your team that need access to this SharePoint folder. All attachments will be uploaded to the folder by noon on the 21st of June. After that time, you will lose access to that folder, so that deadline is very strict. In general, attachments should be in the format of Microsoft Word, Excel, a JPEG, or a PDF. Please follow all the instructions in the application instructions document, which, as I said, is available right now on the CIF website. Please also note that there are 3 different applications. So there's a capital projects application, a small business supporting programs application, and a planning application. Make sure you choose the appropriate application for your project. Within the application itself, there are a number of questions, as you can well imagine. Some of you have been through this before. We are looking for succinct and thorough responses. The questions have word limits, and you'll see what those limits are as you go through the application. The intent of that is to help you communicate the important elements of your responses clearly and succinctly. And as Melinda had pointed out earlier, there is a required CIF sources and uses budget form, an Excel form, which you should submit as the Excel file as it appears, not as a PDF. Upload the Excel file to the SharePoint folder. Additionally, you will be required to submit a detailed project budget in your own format, as Melinda had mentioned before. Next slide, please. So the application process, as we mentioned, all application material will be uploaded to your unique SharePoint folder. A note about reapplications. We talked a little bit before about the number. We get a lot of reapplications, definitely. Bear in mind that they must include all updated attachments. So if you've applied in round 2 or round 3 or round 4, and you're applying again, don't just pull out the attachments that you included in a previous round. They must be updated. The previous folder does not roll over to the new round. Keep in mind that letters of support also need to be updated. Next slide, please. A little bit about required attachments. There are several attachments that can be included. Again, you'll request a SharePoint folder. You put all of your attachments into the folder directly. This will allow you as the applicant to see what you have or haven't provided as an attachment. The NOFA and the application instructions give a list of the typical attachments. So what are the required attachments? For municipalities, in accordance with Connecticut General Statute 8-23 and amended by Public Act 15-95, Any municipality that has not adopted a plan of conservation and development within the past 10 years is ineligible for discretionary state funding unless they require and receive a waiver from that prohibition by the OPM secretary. So if this applies to you, if your POCD is not updated within that 10-year timeframe, you will need to submit a municipal certification of eligibility for discretionary state funding. We would advise that you do that now so that you're not waiting around. Don't wait for the last minute on that one. And you'll need to do that for each grant application that you're submitting. OPM's waiver is done on a per grant application basis. It's not a blanket waiver to apply for all state funds. A resolution. Only municipalities need a certified resolution to request funding from the appropriate municipal body. That could be the Board of Selectmen, the Mayor, Board of Finance, etc. Nonprofits and CDCs need a resolution from their board of directors, from their governing body. As we had mentioned before, the SHPO project notification form. So any structure older than 50 years old or any project that proposes ground disturbance requires this form. Projects may also require additional review under CIPA, as we had talked about before. For capital projects that involve federal funding, the project will need to be in compliance with Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act and National Environmental Policy Act. It is if the project is successful in receiving the grant, it will have to comply with CIPA. And there's additional information you can review in the State Historic Preservation Office website. Planning grants do not need a SHPO notification form. And then the required CIF sources and uses budget template for the correct round. So make sure you're using round 5 forms only. Please read the instructions and fully complete this form, including the funder name and the status of that funding, whether it's pending or committed or you're applying for funding. And then to give us more detail to understand your project, once again, we ask you include your own detailed project budget. And then for nonprofit organizations and community development corporations that are applying, we ask for a certificate of legal existence. You can request these or you can request one of these certificates from the Secretary of State's website. If your organization has ever had a name change, please submit a standard certificate, not just the express version of that. Next slide, please. Before I hand this back over to Melinda, I'm going to talk a little bit about the change policy that the Deputy Commissioner referred to at the start of this webinar. We do want to make everybody aware of this change policy, which was approved by the CIF board last September. We have several awards in round 1 of CIF that during the contracting process brought changes from the original project forward for consideration. So what we want to make very clear here is when bringing your application forward, when you know what you're doing, as Matt had talked about before, don't get caught bringing an application forward and then thinking you'll figure it out as you go along once the project has been awarded. Your grant award will be made on and contracted on what you describe, how you describe your project in the application. So we understand that things happen in the course of a capital project. The intent here is not to say that all change or slight change is unacceptable. DECD, remember, DECD is not making the decision on these projects. It's the CIF board that makes the decision, and that's based on what you've presented. And the governor and the State Bond Commission approve your project on the basis of how you have framed it in the application. Any change request is going to need to be provided to your project manager, your DECD project manager, in writing, and is going to address the bullets that you see here on this slide. So any change in project scope, in the outcome, the anticipated outcomes, in the budget, or in the leveraged funds. A substantial change is being defined as any change to the original project scope and outcomes, budget, or leveraged funds that is quantified as a loss of 20%. So any change that to a budget that creates a gap in the capital stack will be considered substantial change. And then technical change is a process in and of itself. This will go back to the CIF board and the State Bond Commission for review and could possibly delay your project. So with that, thank you very much. I'm going to turn it back over to Melinda.
Thanks, Kim. Fantastic information. I hope everybody got every word she said. It's all important. And remember, we're here to answer your questions. We're going to talk a little bit about lessons learned. One of the hardest things about CIF and being, on the applicant side of these things is linking your capital investment to the underserved audience that we talked about in the beginning, where I read you the actual mission of the Community Investment Fund. We really need to have the intentionality in your project development tied in with how you're going to help the folks that we're all trying to help. It isn't a right or wrong answer. It's how you are filling the need of that population and how we're really gonna move the needle. Intentionality of process ties into that very same thing, as I talked a little bit earlier about really making sure that we're having input from folks who necessarily haven't been at the table before, folks that will be impacted by your project. You really want to have impact into the design of the project. As I said before, we're not telling folks about our project. We're learning what folks want to see and what they think is going to help and work towards that. Transformative projects, really, new and increased outcomes. When you're facing that answer, the question in the application about smart outcomes, really think about what is the community impact of your community investment fund project, this capital investment that you're seeking. What is the actual change in lives? And really try to tie the project to that and create some quantifiable outcomes showing the effect on lives. In more generic terms here, Community Investment Fund really is about the capital project, the small business program, or the planning. This is not to cover programmatic expenses. So when we talked earlier about the budget, and is this feasible? CIF asks for a 5-year pro forma budget. Or once your project is built, right? Build it and they will come, right? What programmatic expenses are going to be incurred by you as the applicant, and how do you plan to fund those? Is it all going to be new fees coming in? Are you looking for new grants to fund things? What is the revenue side of things once your capital project is done? We need to know those kinds of things. Again, keeping in mind programmatic expenses are not covered by CIF. Any of your operating expenses are not eligible. Leases are not eligible. You can do property acquisition as a capital investment, but not leases, okay? And as this whole thing is tied to is your feasibility and sustainability of your project. We really need to know that. Those need to be integrated into the applications. Again, one-on-one consultations with the CIF staff on this webinar today can go into a lot more detail with you about how you can really create impact through your projects. Lessons learned, do's and don'ts. Here are some do's for your application. This is where we need folks to start taking some notes here. We really want clear, succinct, plain language. clearly answer the question that is asked. We've worked very hard with this application to really get to the heart of the matter here, and we've worked with, you know, progression of the questions to really help guide you in your thinking and the things that you need to think about in a capital project that's going to have community impact here. Your project summary, which we asked for very early on in the application, but it's a summary of your entire project. We ask that you write that in the third person and make it your elevator pitch. Put your key components of your project into that summary, your highlights that you really want noticed about your project. Use the round 5 Excel budget template and leave it as an Excel, please. I know that I've said that over and over, and Kim said it over and over. It's really important. And one thing I want to say about that sources and uses document for CIF, it does ask you for the name of the funder, you know, not just that it's federal funding, but, you know, where is that federal funding coming from? If it's philanthropic, do you have several different philanthropic sources? What are they? What is the status of the funding? There are places to fill that in right there on that document. We refer to that document often. It's very critical to your application. So please be very, very careful to include as much detail as you can with in that template. We ask that you name your files consistently that you're going to be uploading to the SharePoint folder. We'd ask for the name of your organization, underscore, name of the document. Keep them as short as you can. You know, if you have an acronym for your organization, please use that as short as you can. Save all of your attachments into your SharePoint folder. Do not email us attachments. Do not send us a link to some attachments. Put them in your SharePoint folder. Lessons learned, don'ts. Don't use grandiose language. Don't provide evasive, unclear, or incomplete answers. Please really answer the questions. We would rather have less language that actually answers the question than sentences that run on and on telling us all of these things that are not pertinent to the question. Do not combine all of your attachments into a single PDF. We need to have each document separate. And something that I'm going to say about this is do not create subfolders in your SharePoint folder. Please do not create subfolders in your SharePoint folder. Thank you. Do not use long and inconsistent file names. When Kim was going through the description of the application process, she was talking about the 3 separate applications which are available. There are links available on the website, the CIF website, to the portals where you'll actually enter your information from your application to submit that. What we recommend is that you use the Word documents that we've provided, which are exactly the same as the online application. Please use the Word documents to write out all of your narrative. All of the questions are there. You're going to know what you're going to face when you actually sign on to that portal. When you sign on to that portal, try to sit down and in one sitting, input all of the information, simply copy and paste from your Word document into the online portal for your application and submit all at once. Whatever you do, do not set up an account when you're saving your progress. Please do not set up an account when you're saving your progress. There are instructions in the application instructions that are posted on the website. Please follow them. It will explain to you to skip setting up an account, and you'll receive an email with any saved progress if you do need to save your progress while you're entering it. I'll say again, please do not save your CIF sources and uses as a PDF. Make sure you're using the round 5. Okay, and we have a few minutes left for questions. I know Wes has been monitoring those. Let's take some questions.
Yes, good afternoon, good morning, and thank you again to Kimberly and Melinda for your excellent description so far. It's been very helpful, and I really appreciate what you're doing for our applicants here. I have attempted to answer a number of questions in the chat, which were easy to do so. but I've saved a number of them to be answered live by you all because I think that the answers to them would be beneficial for everyone to hear. So, and briefly, I have about 5 or 6 to get through. So, hopefully we can get to them all with some succinct answers. Question 1 from anonymous attendee. Can you please expand your explanation of required procurement procedures? Thank you. And I will add on this, are there any resources online that we can maybe direct these requests to?
Yeah, somebody can email the Community Investment Fund. We can send over the forms. Yeah, it's much too big a conversation to get into right now. We would eat up our 8 minutes in a hurry.
However, I think
we can send that out to anyone that needs them.
Yep. From a categorical point of view, however, there are DECD required procurement procedures that must be gone through with this project, correct, Melinda? Yes. In terms of publicly advertising and bidding, and then providing those bid results to DECD so that we can then review them and ensure that the bidding process was done in a fair and open manner.
Exactly. We want to make sure that the set-asides have been established and CHRO guidelines have been followed, things like that.
Wonderful, thank you. A follow-up question, and it gets to the ownership of property. On capital improvement projects, does the state of Connecticut own the property that the project is undertaken on, or is it completely owned by the applicant? Does this property transfer after the project ends? And I think a good discussion for this would be, say, negative pledges, Melinda.
I think that's a project specific question. CIF doesn't dictate any property transfer. So if it were a state-owned site, I would assume that the municipality or the nonprofit organization could be purchasing the site. Wouldn't necessarily have to. That exact situation hasn't come up.
My feedback on this would be if there is a project site where a project takes place, that project site should be dedicated for the use of the project as it's done in the project agreement for the life of that project agreement that's agreed upon between DECD and the applicant. And there are a number of ways that we can do this to ensure that the property does not change hands in such a way that would prevent it from having the project take place. Another question, this one's quick and easy. Is SHPO approval required for all capital applications?
No.
And I think we should designate between application and execution here.
Yeah, exactly. So SHPO gives input into all applications, and they look at the forms that are submitted, but SHPO doesn't make an actual determination until a project is awarded. So if you've received state funding on your project in the past, you may already have a SHPO determination letter, but otherwise there's no actual determination until a project is awarded. So please don't ask SHPO for a determination letter prior to that.
Great. On SHPO, does SHPO review planning projects? Quick and easy, yes or no?
Not required for planning. No SHPO needed.
Thank you. Can you, just looking for...
I feel like I'm taking a quiz.
No, that's okay. And it's kind of the idea. How much can we request for the small business program, and how much of it can be administration? I would also add maybe a 10-second clarification on the goals of the small business program as well.
Okay. Unlimited, you can ask for unlimited. Administration would be built into your application. That would be part of what we would assess as to how you were planning to do that. There are no set limits by the statute on those things.
Great. I have a couple of questions here about changing partners. So to try and condense all of them together, when a project has been, say, an application has been successful and we're in the negotiation or the agreement development phase, what happens, or what is the process if that project changes partners that they're working with and or updates a significant portion of their application because of on the ground changes? And I think that 20% threshold is a good place to start with this.
Okay, that's really not related to the application process. That again, that would be more of a project specific. The project managers would work with a municipality or an MPO that was changing partners. It does happen. Sometimes those things happen. That's not necessarily something that requires the change policy be looked at, but it could come into effect if the partner had a different role
Right.
in the project.
Yeah.
It could affect it, but
right. I think the substantive changes should be reviewed, and obviously the goal is for this to be streamlined. So where we can avoid changing partners, I think we would like to. A question that's been asked twice: what is the deadline for use of funds, and how frequently do we check in regarding outcomes? I think I can take this one. Or actually, Melinda, why don't you go ahead?
Sure. So project timelines vary. That's why we ask for a timeline that you come in with. I think that there can be up to 5 years in these larger construction projects could definitely be a possibility. Planning, we'd like to see done within a year, which should be feasible and should be a decent timeline. As for, what was the second part of the question, Wes?
Reporting, and my answer on that is quarterly.
Okay, so quarterly reporting. This is a good question, though, and it brings up a very good point. Because here at CIF, what we're really trying to do is move needles in relation to public investment communities and Alliance District school systems. CIF has a extended reporting requirement, 5 years post capital project, and that really is to enhance our understanding of what CIF is trying to do here, which is invest in capital that has that community impact. And what is that community impact going forward? So there is a 5-year reporting requirement after the capital project is complete. That's an annual report. It'll be a narrative report that will be related directly to the outcomes that you put in this application.
Great. Thank you so much. Just a couple more, one on capital stacks. Can you please clarify this statement? Full capital stack must be complete for closing. Does that mean 100% of the funding must be secured by time of signing a CIF contract?
Yes.
Yes. Great. Easy one.
Which is months down the road after award. It's not instantaneous.
Right. And so I suppose for the application process, what we would like to see is firm and/or high confidence levels of agreement with, say, lenders and/or other funding entities. For instance, an award letter from a federal agency, an approval letter from a commercial bank, et cetera, to show that these elements of the puzzle that makes up the entire funding of your project are all able to be put together, and that it is shovel ready for that purpose.
Right, and we understand that if you're applying for 4% or 9% tax credits and these things, the numbers aren't necessarily final, but what needs to be settled is that all of the funding to achieve the project as you described it is in place by the time we close.
Yes. And I'm just trying to make sure that I get everything that was put in here. There was a question, and I'll do this really quickly. Please confirm the minimum and maximum budget.
Well, everyone needs to go to lunch.
I have time. I will happily stay on, though, if I don't know if Melinda just wants to shut this down. Confirm the minimum and maximum budget for planning applications. There is no minimum or maximum. It is $250,000. Yes. The checks are written with the dollar value already in the line. There is no alternative. Please do not try to go over or under for 250.
I do want to say that there definitely will be planning projects that require more funding, and that funding can come from other sources. So if a municipality is putting a portion in, that's fine. So the total budget for planning can go over 250,000, but the CIF award is set.
Correct. Let's see here. Based I'll answer timeline questions in the chat. I think there is, here's one. If your project already has said wages determined by the state of Connecticut and funded by them, should we state which contract or need our project is supporting? I think just when it comes to wages, be considerate of prevailing wage and ensure that you either get a determination from Department of Labor or that you have a fair grasp on what will be needed and what will be required, and ensure that that is built into your budget when you do it.
Yeah, so there's a link in the budget form, Wes, for everyone that they can get the basics on prevailing wage and how it applies to DECD projects from the DOL website. Again, this is like SHPO. You don't actually have to have your DOL determination until the project is approved, but we do want people to plan on that.
Wonderful. Okay. And then there were a couple of questions around timeline. I would just direct that to the slides, which will be posted, correct, Melinda?
Yep, they'll be posted and sent out to everyone. Yep.
Great. So
yep,
if you missed that, they will be able to be seen. Here's an interesting one. Our town is both PIC and Alliance. What are the criteria for determining if we are best categorized as Alliance District or a PIC? That sounds pretty project specific. So I think the answer to that question would be reach out to Community Investment Fund at ct.gov and we can better direct your question.
Yeah, the application allows you to say both.
Yeah, wonderful. And I'm just going to keep plugging until we've either answered all of them or Melinda shuts us down. What is the minimum loan rate for this? What is the minimum loan rate for the small business program?
Oh, minimum. Oh, you could go as low as you wanted. We do like to set the Connecticut Small Business Boost Fund as our prevailing rate, though, which right now is 4.5%. So we wouldn't want to see more than that.
Great. Are we able to submit one capital and one planning grant application for a separate project?
That's a great question. Yep. There's no limit on the number of applications that you want to submit. We would suggest, especially with a municipality, that you prioritize what your project would be, but there's no limit, and you can reapply as many times as you like. You can submit as many applications as you like.
Great. I like the creativity of this one. Can we submit a short video to show the community engagement process?
If you can upload it to a SharePoint folder, sure.
Okay, that has been answered. Does previous funding count as leverage support for work in the project scope that has already been completed? For this, I would say, say it's a 3-year project and they were awarded $2 million of ARPA funds, for instance, that have already been spent.
Yep. So we alluded to that in the presentation, and there certainly are previous expenses on the project that can count. I would say if a master plan was done 15 years ago, that doesn't really count.
Right.
But if it was, I think the example that I used was recent remediation on a site, that could count. Yep.
Great. Okay. I think there are other questions in here, but I think they're best left for individual interactions. So again, if you have an open question, please submit that to Community Investment Fund at ct.gov. I will be, we will be posting these slides online. So I think that that's gonna do it for me on the Q&A front here.
Right. I really want to encourage folks to email you questions. We get back to them. There are several of us that monitor that inbox, and set up one-on-one appointments. You'll talk to Kim or Wes or to myself, and we'd love to spend time with you talking about your project. So when you set up for your one-on-one appointments, please have yourself organized, have your team ready, bring as many members of your team as you like. You can forward that team's invite to other folks that you would like to attend, and we look forward to talking with you about your projects. June 21st, noon, deadline. Thanks so much. We appreciate you all.